Welcome to Excel for Lab Reports. Today, we're going to learn how to use Excel to make creating your lab reports easier. We're going to be making graphs and charts and running some simple statistics tests, so even if you're not in a lab class, feel free to watch this workshop. Excel is part of Microsoft Office, meaning it's free for all Stony Brook students. Just visit software.stonybrook.edu and you can download it onto your personal computer. We also have a basic Excel workshop where we will learn the basic functions of Excel by making a simple budget planner. And we also have intermediate Excel, where we make sense of large sets of data by doing things such as creating pivot tables, applying conditional formatting, and creating if statements. The first thing that we're going to do is visit the Google site for this workshop. The link is sites.google.com/stonybrook.edu/excel-4-lab-reports. And this is what the homepage of the website will look like. Click on the documentation tab and you'll see we have the documentation down here. So those are the instructions that I'm going to be reading from. You can download them and follow along if you would like. But what we're going to do first is click on the spreadsheet link. This is where the data is going to be. So once this spreadsheet downloads, we're going to click on the download button on the top right. If you click on open with, it will give you the Google Sheets option, and that would defeat the whole purpose of this workshop. So click on this download button on the top right. Once it downloads to the bottom of your screen, click on it, and it will open Excel. Okay, so once we have Excel open, it may ask to enable editing at the top up here. I created this spreadsheet. There's no viruses attached to it or anything like that, so you can click enable editing, and once you click on that, you will get your regular Excel bar up here at the top. Now, I'm working on a Mac computer. If you're working with a Windows computer, everything is going to basically be the same. If something was to be different, I will let you know that it would look different. But the buttons are all in the same place. Everything basically looks the same. So in this workshop, we're going to be going over how to make a scatter plot, a column graph, a histogram, and then running descriptive statistics. So first thing is we have our scatter plot here, and you can see it's time versus absorbance, and then we also have a second set of data called absorbance too. So the first thing we're going to do is create our scatter plot. So I'm just going to click and select my first two columns of data, and I'm not going to include the titles. I'm just going to include the actual data. Up here at the top of my header bar, I'm going to click on Insert. And then we have in the middle over here all of our different chart options. You can click on recommended charts. That'll give you what Excel thinks would look good with your data if you don't know what kind of chart you want to make. But in this case, we know we want to make a scatter plot. So this bottom middle option over here says scatter, and I'm just going to click on the first option. Okay. Now you can click and drag this graph wherever you want. You can make it bigger or smaller. I'll make it a little bit bigger. Okay, now in this case, if you're using a Windows computer, you'll have a little plus sign over here when your graph is selected. That's basically a shortcut to formatting the graph. So things like adding axis titles and chart title, grid lines and stuff like that. So you can just click on that plus button and check off whatever you want for your graph, any formatting, and then you're pretty much set. But we're gonna do it the long way because obviously we don't have that plus sign over here. Okay. So when your graph is selected, you'll get these new tabs at the top called Chart Design and Format. Now, even though axis titles and grid lines and a legend sound like formatting, they're actually all under Chart Design. And even more specific, if you click on Chart Design, all of those options are most likely under Add Chart Element, which is all the way on the left. Now, for a Windows computer, this is the same thing. So, you don't have to use that plus sign. You can still use these buttons on the side over here. So the first thing that we're going to do is change our chart title. So it'll already automatically give you a chart title. So just double click on where it says chart title. then we can type in time versus absorbance. Okay. And now we can add axis titles. So click on your graph again so that you get chart design tab up here, and then go all the way to the left to add chart element. And now we have axis titles. You can see over here, it gives you chart title just in case, like the way that we'll make the column graph, it won't give us a chart title automatically. So we'll be able to add one right here. So go up to axis titles and click on primary horizontal. Once you've done that, double click on the axis title at the bottom and type time in minutes. Okay, and now we're going to repeat the same thing for our vertical axis. So we're going to go to chart design, add chart element, and then down to axis titles and click on primary vertical. And now you'll see the text box pops up over here, so I could double click and type in absorbance. All right. Now remember, in order for those buttons to appear, you need your graph to be selected. See, now I get that chart design tab up here at the top. All right. Next thing that we're going to do is add a legend. So again, chart design, and then go to the left and click on add chart element. And now we're going to go down here to legend. Okay, now we have a bunch of different options for legend. It doesn't matter which one you pick, whichever one you want. I'm just going to put mine on the left. Okay, so now you'll see we have series 1 over here, and we actually want this to say absorbance. But unfortunately, this is not a text box. I can click on this for as long as I want, and it's not going to become a text box. So what we're going to do instead is go to the select data button. So again, under chart design, now go to the right and click on select data. Okay, right now you can see that series 1 is over here, but we want to change that name to absorbance. So click on series 1 just to make sure it's highlighted. And now if you go over here, you see the name is empty, but the X and Y values are already plugged in. So click on this little square with the arrow in it. On Windows computers, I think it's like a white square with a black arrow, but in this case, it's a white square with a red arrow, whatever it is. Click on it. And now click on absorbance on your data. So just absorbance. And then hit enter. Okay. And now you'll see the legend entry over here says absorbance. Okay, now if you're using a Windows computer, it won't automatically have this next to you. You'll have to click on where it says series 1 and then click edit. So edit would be right here. And then once you hit edit, it'll give you these options. All right, so now I'm gonna hit OK. And now you'll see our legend is updated right over here and it says absorbance. Okay, next thing we're gonna do is format the axes. So double click on your horizontal axis. So double click on one of the numbers. So I'm going to double click on 4. And when you do that, you'll get this format axis bar on the right. Okay, now make sure that you're under axis options and then these little columns right here. And now you'll see we have a bunch of different options. Okay, so the first thing is bounds. So you can see down here, our bounds go from 0 to 6. And actually, I'll zoom in a little bit over here so you can clearly see that. So you can see it goes from 0 to 6. Now, our data actually only goes to 5. Now, obviously, you usually want an extra line over here, but just for the sake of changing things around, let's say we only want our bounds to go from 0 to 5. So for bounds, we have minimum is 0 and maximum, let's change that to 5. And then hit enter and it will update. So now we can see our time at 5 minutes is farthest to the right. Now, minor units. So our major units are now 0.5, so we can see 0 to 0.5 to 1, and our minor units are 0.1. We can't see those right now, but once we add tick marks, those will be important. So for major units, I'm going to change that to 1, and I'm going to change my minor units to 0.5. And now you can see it goes 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 and so on. And now we're going to scroll down and click on tick marks down here. And now we have major type and minor type. Okay, so if you click on none next to major type, click on outside. You'll see down here it extends the line, right? So for point 1, it extends all the way down, and now we have a tick mark for minute 1. Now for minor, that's going to get a little more interesting because we can't see that right now. So next to minor type, I'm going to click on outside again. And now you'll see we set our minor bounds up here to 0.5. So now we have a tick mark at 0, and then a little tick mark at 0.5, then 1, then 1.5, and so on. So that's how you can add tick marks and decide where they go. Now, say like you want to revert everything back to the original. It's really easy. For your major type, just click on none. For your minor type, click on none. And then up here, you can just click these little arrows and it will revert back to the original. So now everything looks exactly the same. And then once you're done with that, you can click on the X for your format axis bar, and then we are back to our original graph. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add a trend line. So click on your graph, and then once you get this chart design tab, go all the way to the left for add chart element, and then go all the way down to trend line. And now we're going to choose linear. You see you have a bunch of different options, but for now, just click on linear. Automatically, it will add this to the legend. If you had more than one data set, as we will in a few minutes, it would give you a little entry box and say, do you want the trend line for the first set, the second set, or both sets of data? Okay, now double click on the trend line itself, and you'll get this format trend line bar on the right. Make sure you click on these this little column option. Okay. Now, in this case, say that you made a linear trend line and then you realize you want it to be exponential or polynomial or something like that. That's fine. You can change it right here. No problem. But we're going to go all the way down to the bottom. We're going to do two things with this trend line. First, you can set the intercept. So right now, our trend line is aligned with the first data point, but we can align it with the origin down here. So I'm going to check off set intercept, and it automatically puts 0.0. So now it's automatically now aligned with the origin. We can also display the equation of the trend line on the chart. So if you check that off, you'll see the trend line equation is up here. You don't have to solve for it if you don't want to. Excel will do it for you. And the same thing goes for displaying the r-squared value. So if I check off display r-squared value, you'll see it gives it to you up here. So then you don't have to calculate those values. Once you're done with that, you can uncheck those two, and you can uncheck set intercept or leave it whatever you would like. But now I'm going to X out of this format trendline bar. Actually, I'm going to uncheck this and uncheck and X out of that. Okay. The next thing we're going to do with this graph is remove our grid lines. I know that in some classes you're not supposed to have grid lines on your graph. It's very easy. Again, go to chart design. Go all the way to the left to add chart element, and now go down to grid lines. So you'll see next to primary, major, horizontal, we have this check mark. On Windows computers, it'll just be grayed out. That means that, these grid lines are currently on the graph. So click on that, and it will take them away. And now do the same thing. So add chart element, grid lines, primary, major, vertical, click on that. Okay, and now we don't have any grid lines. All right, so we're almost done with this graph, but the next thing we want to do is change it to a line graph. So let's say you have this scatter plot and it looks great, and then you're like, wait a second, this would look so much better as a line graph. That would be the correct graph for this data. So now, under chart design, go to the right and click on change chart type. And now hover over line and pick 2D line. So the first option it gives you. On a Windows computer, there would be all of these options on the left of an entry box, and then you would click on line and then click on the graph that you wanted. So click on that. And now you'll see it's the same exact data. It gives us the trend line still, but now everything is a line graph instead. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is add our second data set, right? So we've been kind of neglecting absorbance 2 over here, but now we're going to add it to our graph. So say you did an experiment and this was trial 1, and then you ran trial 2 and you got this data. And instead of creating another graph, you just want to add the second trial to your data set. No problem. So what we're going to do is select your graph, right? And then click on select data like we did before. Now on a Windows computer, we're going to use this plus button over here. I mean on a Mac computer, sorry. On a Windows computer, there will be a button that says add right over here. So for a Windows computer, click on add. For a Mac computer, click on this plus sign. And now we get series 2. So for the name box is empty, so click on that little box with the arrow and click on absorbance 2 on your spreadsheet and hit enter. Now it doesn't ask us for our X values because they're going to be the same, right? So at 1 minute, there's going to be a data point. At 2 minutes, there's going to be a data point. So for Y values, click on the box with the arrow in it and select your data for absorbance 2. Then hit enter. Okay. And now since we did it by the select data button, we don't have to worry about what our legend will say. It will automatically update. So now hit OK. And now we have absorbance 2. Okay, now if you wanted to add a trend line for absorbance 2, you would just do the same thing as we did for absorbance 1, and it would Excel recognizes that you have 2 data sets, so it would ask if you wanted for absorbance 1 or absorbance 2. Now the final thing we're going to do with this graph is change the color scheme. So with your graph selected, under chart design, go to the left and click on change colors and scroll down to the option that has the black and the gray. It's monochromatic palette 7 and click on that. And you'll see now everything updates so it's all black and white. And that is how you would format your scatter plot. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is go to our column graph. So at the bottom of your spreadsheet, click on the column graph tab, and then you'll see we have this data. Okay, so what we're doing is creating a column graph that displays multiple data sets, and we're going to add all the data at one time. So with the scatter plot, we went in and we made the graph with the first trial, and then we added the second trial. In this case, we're doing everything all at once. Okay, so don't click on anything. Just click somewhere outside of your data set because you don't want Excel to drop the graph onto the data set. So just click somewhere in the middle of your spreadsheet. And then up at the top, click on Insert. Now remember, we don't have anything selected right now. That's totally fine. Click on the column graph option up here, and then click on 2D column. And now we have this white rectangle. However, this white rectangle has the function of the column graph in it. So, I'm just making it a little bit bigger. So, it's still a useful white rectangle. Now, up here we have chart design because, again, it is still a graph. And now we're going to go to the right and click on select data. So, we're going to do everything right here, right now. So, legend entries. Again, if you're using a Windows computer, click on the Add button. If you're using a Mac computer, click on this plus button. So I'm going to click on the plus button. Okay, now that's Series 1. For the name, click on the square with the arrow in it and click on Before Exercise. Then hit Enter. For your Y values, click on that square with the arrow in it and click and select your 3 before exercise data points. So 0.5, 0.6, and 0.5. Okay, now we're going to repeat the same thing for after exercise. So again, if you're using a Windows computer, click on that Add button. If you're using a Mac computer, click on the plus button. Okay, now for Series 2, click on the box with the arrow in it next to name and click on after exercise and hit Enter. And now for your Y values, click on that square and select 0.9, 0.8, and 0.7, and then hit enter. Okay, now I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to pretend that I'm done, and I'm going to look at my graph. Oh, it looks pretty good. But the only problem is down here, we have participant 1, 2, and 3, while up here on our actual data set, our participants have names. Okay, now let's go back and click on Select Data. Down here, we have horizontal category access labels. It's going to be in about the same place on a Windows computer. Click on the square next to that. And now just select your participant names. And then hit enter. And once you've done that, you can hit OK. And now you'll see down here, it updates the 3 names. Okay. So all of the formatting would be exactly the same. So adding a chart title, labeling axes, adding a legend, working with the axis. In this case, it would be your y-axis over here. Adding a trend line, seeing the r-squared value, adding or removing grid lines, changing to a different graph type, adding another data set, or changing the color scheme. All of that would be the same as we did with the scatter plot. So if you want to format this graph in any way, just go back to the scatter plot instructions and follow those along. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is access data add-ins. So I'm going to click on this histogram tab at the bottom. Now, this is the only place where it's a major difference between Mac and Windows computers. So I wrote down, it takes 2 seconds, but I wrote down the instructions for both on the documentation so you can follow along depending on what kind of computer you are using, but I will read both instructions right now. Okay, so on a Mac computer, go up to the top, all the way to the top, and click on Tools. Go down and click on Excel Add-ins. Check off Analysis Toolpack, and then press OK. Okay, now for a Windows computer, you will click on File, it's going to be up here, then Options is going to be at the bottom once that screen changes, then click on Add-ins, and then click Go. In that case, don't hit OK, make sure that you hit Go. Check off Analysis Toolpack and Analysis Toolpack VBA, and then hit OK. Okay, so data add-ins aren't something that you have to pay for. They're just not automatically downloaded on Excel. So downloading them doesn't charge you or the school or anything. You're free to download them. Now, if we click on the Data tab up here, you will see all the way to the right, you will now have a data analysis button where you previously did not. So if we click on this data analysis button, you'll see we have so many options. So this is where you can create your ANOVA tests, run descriptive statistics. We have histogram over here, and then your t-tests and your z-test are also down here. So that is how you would access any of those tests. So what we want to do is create a histogram. So again, I don't have anything selected. I'm just going to click on histogram. And then I'm going to click OK. And now we have a couple different options. So first is our input range. So I'm going to click the square with the arrow next to input range. And I'm going to select all of my data points. Just my data, not my actual title. And then hit enter. Then for bin range, I'm going to click on the arrow with the square with the arrow, and I'm going to select my bin limits or categories. And once we make this histogram, I'll show you how it all makes sense. So I'm going to hit enter. Okay. Now for our output options, we have a couple different choices. So it automatically sets to new worksheet ply. Basically, that's creating a new tab at the bottom. We can also check off new workbook. That would open an entirely new file. Now, usually if I'm writing a lab report and I have to make, say, 5 graphs, I'm going to make one workbook, so, one file, and name it lab report 5 or whatever it is. And then each graph, I'm going to have its own tab at the bottom. That way, if I want to say, oh, what did I do with that scatter plot? I can click on scatter plot. So usually what I would want to do is keep my histogram on the same page as my histogram data. So I'm going to click on output range instead, and I'm going to click on the box with the arrow. And now click somewhere in the middle of your spreadsheet. Don't click on top of your data set because you don't want your histogram to get dropped on top of your raw data. You want everything to be separate. But at least when it drops the histogram, I'll be able to say, oh, okay, here's the raw data and here's the histogram. So now hit enter. And now at the bottom over here, check off chart output and then hit OK. Okay. So again, you can click and move your histogram wherever you want. You can make it bigger or smaller with these squares. And now we can look at it over here. Oops, sorry. Okay, so basically the histogram is reading the frequency of different points. So how many times do these different points show up in our data set? So over here, we have all of our data points. Now imagine that this is like thousands of data points. And then we have our bin limits, basically our categories. So for example, we want to see how many times does 1.1 show up. So over here, Excel will read the data for us, and it will say, well, in bin or category 1.1, we had a frequency of 3, meaning 1.1 showed up 3 times in the data set. Then we can read it on the chart over here. So 1.1 had a frequency of 3. So now, let's see, 1.7 is up to 5. So we could go over to our data set and try to count, like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then, where's 5? I probably passed it. So, we could read it, but look, I already made a mistake with counting. So we could also go over here and say, in bin 1.7, we had a frequency of 5, meaning 1.7 showed up 5 times. So you can see it's a lot easier to just read it off the histogram. Now, as far as this chart goes, there's not a lot to format with it because it gives you the legend, it gives you tick marks over here, it gives you category, it gives you axis titles. So you're really basically set with just leaving your histogram the way it is. Okay. Final thing is let's click on descriptive statistics and you'll see that this is the same exact data from your histogram. So what we're going to do is click on this data tab up here at the top and then go all the way to the right and click on data analysis. Again, remember nothing is selected. Now go up here to descriptive statistics and click on that and then hit OK. All right, now our input range. Click on the square with the arrow in it next to input range. And now let's just select all of our data points. And then hit enter. Okay. Now again, for our output options, we have the same 3 choices. So we have new worksheet ply, which would add a new tab. We have new workbook, which would open an entirely new file. And we have output range. So we're going to click on output range. Then click on the square with the arrow in it and select one cell in the middle of your spreadsheet. And then hit enter. Okay. Now, down here, we can check off whatever you would like. So we can do, we're going to check off summary statistics, but you can see we also have like confidence level for the mean and different options. So then click OK. Okay. So if I zoom in, I can see that I have all of my descriptive statistics for this data set. So we're going to format this in 3 ways. First, we're going to adjust the column width, then we're going to merge and center our title, and finally, we're going to give it a plain white background to eliminate those grid lines. So first, we can see that standard deviation does not fit in this cell. So my data set is between columns H and I. So go to the line up here between columns H and I until your cursor turns into that black line with the 2 arrows sticking off of it. So you're basically between the 2 letters. And double click. Excel will automatically adjust the column width to whatever the longest text is. So for standard deviation, it automatically adjusts it to that length. Second thing we're going to do is merge and center our title. So right now, our title is in cell H10 and I10. So 2 separate columns. but instead I want these two cells to be one long cell. You can see I did that up here. So this, you can see this would be 3 separate cells. I made these into one big cell. So again, back down here. In order to do that, click on the Home tab at the top left, and then select your 2 cells, right? So H10 and I10, or whatever your 2 title cells are. And then click on Merge and Center. So that's right over here. It's right under Wrap Text. So click on that. And now you will see that your 2 cells are now turned into 1 cell. So you can double click this where it says column 1 and change it to descriptive statistics. And you'll see that it centers your text right over these 2 columns. Okay, now the final thing that we're going to do is make a plain white background. So now that this is 1 cell, just click and drag down and it will select all of that data that you have. And again, under the Home tab, click on the drop down arrow next to Fill Color. So Fill Color is to the left of Font Color. And then just click on Plain White. And now you will see that we have our complete descriptive statistics set over here. Now, if you wanted to add your graphs to Microsoft Word, you could simply go and right-click on the graph and do copy, and then go to Microsoft Word and do paste, and then you would be able to easily transfer your graphs over to your lab reports. If you have any questions, just send them to the email on the screen. And again, we have basic Excel and intermediate Excel if you want to keep learning about Excel. I know it's so exciting. And thank you for watching.